Jason Statham was taking a peaceful stroll through a quiet park, enjoying a rare moment of solitude. The golden evening sun stretched long shadows across the winding path, the gentle rustling of leaves filling the air. For once, there were no flashing cameras, no autograph seekers, just silence. But what he saw next would change everything. A pregnant black woman in a wheelchair, completely defenseless, was being viciously harassed by a ruthless biker. His words dripped with hate, his presence radiated menace. Emily, the woman, tried to stay calm, but fear clutched her heart. Alone, vulnerable, and with no one around to help until Jason stepped in. What happened next will leave you speechless. Stay until the end to witness how Jason Statham turned from action star to real-life hero. Don't forget to subscribe and drop a comment. Where are you watching from? Your support keeps this channel going. Emily's heart pounded in her chest as fear tightened its grip on her. Every instinct screamed at her to get away, but there was nowhere to run. The biker's hostility was growing by the second, and she could feel the danger closing in around her. "Please," she said softly, trying to keep her voice steady. "I don't want any trouble." The man sneered, stepping even closer. "Oh, there's no trouble," he said, his voice dripping with malice. "I just don't like seeing people like you acting like they belong here." Emily's fingers tightened around the armrests of her wheelchair, her knuckles white as she tried to steady her trembling hands. The man loomed over her, his shadow swallowing her whole. "What's the matter?" he taunted. "Cat got your tongue?" Emily swallowed hard. "I just want to be left alone." The biker leaned in, his face mere inches from hers. "And I want you to stand up." Emily's breath hitched. Her eyes widened in shock. I can't." The man's expression darkened, a cruel glint flashing in his eyes. "I said stand up." "I'm pregnant," she whispered, tears threatening to spill. "I can't stand." For a moment, his gaze flickered to her belly, as if some sliver of humanity might break through. But then, his scowl deepened, and before she could react, he grabbed the armrest of her wheelchair. "Stand up." Emily gasped, clutching her stomach protectively. "Please, don't." Then, "That's enough." The voice cut through the tension like a blade. The biker froze, his head snapping around. Jason Statham stood just a few feet away, his stance calm but coiled with tension, his eyes locked onto the unfolding scene. "Who the hell are you?" the biker spat. Jason took a slow step forward, his expression unreadable. "Someone who doesn't like bullies." The biker puffed out his chest, trying to make himself look bigger. "Mind your own business." Jason's gaze didn't waver. "This is my business now." The air crackled with tension. Emily clutched her belly, barely breathing as she watched the two men face off. The biker's lip curled. "You have no idea who you're messing with." Jason's lips barely moved, his voice low and steady. "Neither do you." The biker's muscles tensed. Then, without warning, he lunged, his fist flying straight for Jason's face. Big mistake. Jason moved like lightning, sidestepping the punch with effortless precision, his movements sharp, controlled, almost too fast to follow. The biker stumbled forward, thrown off balance by his own momentum. Before he could recover, Jason seized his arm, twisting it behind his back in one smooth motion. A guttural growl of pain ripped from the biker's throat. "Let go of me, you son of a..." Jason leaned in, his grip like iron. "You're done. Walk away now, or this ends badly for you." The biker struggled, thrashing against Jason's hold, but there was no breaking free. What happened next will leave you speechless. Stay until the end to see how Jason Statham turned from action star to real-life hero. And don't forget, hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below. Where are you watching from? Your support keeps this channel going. "You have no idea who you're messing with," the biker barked, his face twisted with rage. "You think you're tough? Think you can just..." Jason cut him off, his voice calm but razor sharp. "I'm not here to prove anything. I'm here to stop you from hurting someone who doesn't deserve it. Now walk away before you make this worse for yourself." For a moment, the biker hesitated. His breath was ragged, his fists clenched at his sides. His eyes flickered with frustration, uncertainty. But then he looked at Emily, sitting in her wheelchair, vulnerable, and something cruel ignited in him. "You think this changes anything?" he hissed. "She doesn't belong here. People like her never will." Jason's jaw tightened. His patience was gone. With a sharp shove, he released the biker, sending him stumbling backward. "Leave. Now." The biker scrambled to his feet, rubbing his arm where Jason had twisted it. Fury burned in his eyes, but now there was something else, doubt. He scanned the empty park, as if searching for someone to back him up. There was no one. With a bitter snarl, he grabbed his helmet from the ground and jabbed a finger in Jason's direction. "This isn't over." Jason didn't move. He just watched. Silent. Unshaken. The biker mounted his motorcycle, revved the engine, and with one last glare, sped off down the path, disappearing into the distance. Silence settled over the park once more, broken only by the distant chirping of birds and the gentle rustling of leaves in the breeze. Emily let out a shaky breath, one she hadn't realized she'd been holding. Her hands trembled in her lap. The adrenaline was wearing off, leaving only fear and exhaustion in its place. Jason turned to her, his sharp expression softening. "Are you okay?" Emily nodded, but her voice wavered. I think so." Jason crouched beside her, concern flickering in his eyes. "Did he hurt you?" Emily's hand instinctively moved to her belly. Her fingers trembled as she pressed against the curve of her abdomen. He kicked me," she whispered, her voice breaking. I don't know if the baby." Jason's expression darkened. The quiet fury that had been simmering beneath the surface reignited. "You need to get checked out," he said firmly. "Do you have someone to call? Family? Friends?" Emily shook her head, eyes welling with tears. I'm alone." Jason pulled his phone from his pocket. "Then I'm calling an ambulance." Emily opened her mouth to protest, but the words caught in her throat. The reality of what had just happened was sinking in. The fear. The helplessness. The pain. Tears slipped down her cheeks. She wiped them away quickly, not wanting to seem weak. Jason saw it. He placed a reassuring hand on her arm, his grip steady. "You're not alone. Not right now. I'll stay with you until help gets here." Emily looked at him, her heart pounding with a mix of gratitude and disbelief. "Thank you," she whispered. "I don't even know your name." Jason gave her a faint smile. "I'm Jason. And you don't need to thank me. No one should have to go through what you just did." In the distance, the sound of sirens grew louder. The ambulance pulled up, flashing lights cutting through the peaceful park. Paramedics rushed over. As they carefully lifted Emily onto the stretcher, she turned back to Jason, her voice barely audible over the commotion. "If it's a boy," she murmured, "I'll name him after you." Jason's eyes softened, a flicker of emotion breaking through his usual steel exterior. "You just focus on getting better," he said gently. "The rest will fall into place." The ambulance doors closed, and Jason watched as it pulled away, disappearing into the distance. But he knew this wasn't over. The biker's words echoed in his mind, a reminder that hatred still lurked in the shadows, waiting for moments of weakness to strike. But Jason also knew one thing for certain: standing up to it, no matter the cost, was the right thing to do. And he wasn't about to stop now. What happened next will leave you speechless. Stay until the end to see how Jason Statham turned from action star to real-life hero. And before you go, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and drop a comment. Where are you watching from? Your support helps bring more stories like this to life. Jason had seen fear before. He'd seen people pushed to their limits, fighting against impossible odds. But this was different. This was personal. The way Emily had instinctively protected herself, shielding her unborn child, despite being at her most vulnerable, it wasn't just about stopping that biker. It was about making sure people like him never got away with their actions. As they arrived at the hospital, Jason pulled into the parking lot and hurried inside. He wasn't about to let her go through this alone. Inside, Emily was being wheeled into the emergency room, her face pale, her hand still protectively cradling her belly. Jason followed closely, his jaw clenched, his every instinct telling him to make sure she was safe. A nurse approached him, noticing his concern. "Are you family?" she asked gently. Jason hesitated for only a second before nodding. "I'm a friend. She doesn't have anyone else." The nurse offered a small, knowing smile. "She's in good hands. We'll run some tests, make sure she and the baby are all right. You can wait in the lounge." But Jason didn't go to the lounge. Instead, he stood near the doors leading to the examination area, his arms crossed tightly over his chest. He wasn't going anywhere until he knew Emily was okay. Minutes stretched into an hour. Jason paced the corridor, his mind restless. He couldn't shake the image of the biker's sneer, the twisted satisfaction on his face when he thought he had power over someone weaker. Jason knew men like that, cowards who preyed on the vulnerable, using hatred to mask their own insecurities. It made his blood boil. Finally, the doors swung open, and a doctor stepped out, a clipboard in hand. He was a middle-aged man with kind eyes and a calm demeanor. "Are you here for Miss Emily Parker?" he asked. Jason straightened. His heart pounded. "Yeah. How is she?" The doctor gave a reassuring nod. "She's stable. We ran a series of tests, and thankfully, there doesn't appear to be any immediate harm to the baby. We'll keep her overnight for observation, just to be sure, but she's very lucky. That kind of trauma could have caused serious complications." Jason exhaled a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. "Thank God. You can see her now," the doctor added, "but try not to overwhelm her. She's been through a lot." Jason nodded and stepped into the room. Emily lay in the hospital bed, eyes closed, her hand still resting over her belly. As he entered, she stirred, slowly opening her eyes. A faint smile tugged at her lips when she saw him. "You stayed," she said softly. "Of course," Jason replied, pulling a chair closer to her bed. "I wasn't going to leave you alone." Her eyes filled with gratitude, but beneath it, there was still fear. A lingering unease. Did they catch him? The biker? Jason nodded. "The police are handling it. He's not getting away with what he did." Emily sighed, a mix of relief and exhaustion washing over her. "Thank you. I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't been there." Jason shook his head. "You don't have to thank me. What he did was unacceptable. No one should have to go through that." Emily dropped her gaze to her hands. "It's not the first time I've dealt with people like him. Being black, disabled, and pregnant, it's like I have a target on my back. People see me and make assumptions. They think I'm weak, that I don't belong." Jason's jaw tightened. They're wrong. People like him thrive on fear, but they're the ones who are weak. You stood your ground. You didn't let him break you. Emily blinked back tears. "It doesn't feel that way. I was terrified." Jason's voice softened. "Being brave doesn't mean you're not scared. It means you keep going, even when you are." For a moment, she was silent, absorbing his words. "I just want to feel safe. I want my baby to grow up in a world where they don't have to face this kind of hate." Jason reached out, placing a firm but gentle hand over hers. "We can't change the whole world overnight. But we can fight back. We can stand up to people like him. And we can make sure your story is heard." Emily looked up at him, a flicker of determination in her tired eyes. "Do you really think it'll make a difference?" Jason nodded. "It already has." His phone buzzed in his pocket. When he pulled it out, the screen was flooded with notifications, news outlets picking up the story, social media posts sharing the security footage from the park. People weren't just watching. They were outraged. He turned the screen toward her. See? People are already talking about it. They're on your side. Emily stared at the screen, a flicker of hope breaking through the exhaustion in her face. I never thought anyone would care. Jason smiled. You're not alone in this. People care more than you think. And if you ever feel like losing hope, remember this moment. One voice can spark change. Emily squeezed his hand. Thank you, Jason. For everything. Jason stood, his expression serious but warm. Rest tonight. Tomorrow, we figure out the next steps. As he turned to leave, Emily's voice stopped him. Jason? He glanced back. If it's a boy, I'll name him after you. Jason's heart clenched, emotion flickering in his usually hardened gaze. You just focus on getting better, he said softly. The rest will fall into place. What happened next will leave you speechless. Stay until the end to see how Jason Statham turned from action star to real-life hero. And don't forget, hit that subscribe button and drop a comment. Where are you watching from? Your support helps bring more stories like this to life. Jason's expression softened, his voice steady yet sincere. That's an honor, he said, his eyes meeting Emily's. But the most important thing is that he grows up knowing his mom is one of the strongest people I've ever met. Emily's lips trembled as she smiled, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. I'll make sure he knows. As Jason stepped out of the hospital room, his mind was already racing ahead. The video was out there. The world was watching. But this fight wasn't over, not by a long shot. And Jason knew one thing for certain. He wasn't done standing up to injustice. Not now. Not ever. The video that shook the world. The footage from the park spread like wildfire. Within hours, it had been shared across every major social media platform, racking up millions of views. Outrage poured in from all corners of the world. People were horrified by the bikers' actions and in awe of Jason's intervention. News outlets jumped on the story. Headlines flooded the internet. Jason Statham heroically intervenes in racist assault. Pregnant woman saved from brutal attack by Hollywood star. Bikers' hate-fueled attack caught on camera, justice demanded. There was no room for doubt. The biker's hateful words, his violent attack, it was all caught on camera. There was no way to twist the truth. Jason had never been one for media attention when it came to his personal life. He preferred to keep his focus on his work, letting the tabloids chase after someone else. But this was different. This wasn't about a movie premiere or a red carpet event. This was about something that mattered. Sitting in his home office, Jason scrolled through the endless flood of messages on his phone. Thousands of people were calling for justice. Others were praising him for stepping up when it mattered most. Fans, activists, everyday people, they all had something to say. But Jason wasn't focused on the praise. His mind kept going back to Emily. The fear in her eyes. The way she had instinctively cradled her belly, trying to shield her unborn child. The quiet strength she had shown, despite everything. She didn't deserve any of it. No one did. Taking a deep breath, Jason opened his phone's camera app and hit record. He rarely made personal statements, but this time, he felt like he had to. The world needed to hear this. I've been reading all your messages, he began, his voice steady but firm. And I want to thank everyone who's shown support for Emily. She's a brave woman who went through something no one should ever have to experience. But I want to make one thing clear, this isn't just about what happened in that park. It's about something much bigger. He paused, choosing his words carefully. The kind of hatred she faced? It's not new. It's something people deal with every single day, all over the world. And it's not enough to be outraged when we see it on video. We have to be willing to step up, to take action, whether that means offering support, calling out prejudice, or standing between someone vulnerable and a threat. Jason's expression softened, but his tone remained unwavering. I didn't do anything extraordinary that day. I just did what anyone should do, help someone in need. And I'm asking all of you to do the same. Let's not wait for the next video to go viral. Let's be the ones who step in before things get that far. Satisfied, Jason ended the recording and uploaded it to his social media accounts. Within minutes, his video was being shared across platforms, spreading just as fast as the original footage. But Jason didn't linger to watch the reaction. He had something more important to do. A visit that mattered more than headlines. Later that day, Jason returned to the hospital. The media storm hadn't fully reached Emily yet, and he wanted to check on her before the world turned its attention to her story. As he stepped into her room, he felt a wave of relief seeing her sitting up in bed, gently rubbing her belly. Despite everything, there was a quiet resilience about her. "Jason," she greeted, her smile warm but tired. "I wasn't sure if you'd come back." Jason pulled up a chair beside her bed. "Of course I did. How are you feeling?" "Better," Emily said, her voice steady but laced with exhaustion. "The doctors say the baby's fine. They'll be discharging me tomorrow." Jason nodded, relieved. "That's great. I've been thinking about you a lot." Emily's smile faded slightly as she looked down at her hands. "I've been thinking too. About everything that happened. About what he said to me." She took a shaky breath. "It's not just the attack that hurt. It's the words. The hate. I've dealt with it my whole life, but this time, it feels different. More real." Jason reached out, resting a reassuring hand over hers. "You don't have to carry that alone. People have seen what happened. They're speaking out. They're on your side." Emily met his gaze, her expression a mix of hope and uncertainty. "Are they really? Or are they just shocked for now? Will they forget about it in a week when the next viral story comes along?" Jason leaned forward, his voice low but firm. "Some might forget, but others won't. And even if the world moves on, that doesn't mean we stop fighting." Emily inhaled sharply, as if those words had hit her in a place she hadn't expected. For the first time since that night, she looked at him with something other than exhaustion. She looked at him with determination. Jason could see it, the shift. The realization that she wasn't just a victim. That she wasn't powerless. She was part of the fight now. As he stood up to leave, her voice stopped him. "Jason?" He turned back. "If it's a boy, I'll name him after you." Jason felt something tighten in his chest. A rare moment of emotion breaking through his hardened exterior. He offered her a small but genuine smile. "That's an honor. But the most important thing is that he grows up knowing his mom as one of the strongest people I've ever met." Emily's lips trembled as she smiled. "I'll make sure he knows." Jason gave her one last nod before stepping out of the room. The fight wasn't over. The world was watching. And Jason wasn't done standing up to injustice. Not now. Not ever. What happened next will leave you speechless. Stay until the end to see how Jason Statham turned from action star to real-life hero. And before you go, hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below. Where are you watching from? Your support helps bring more stories like this to life. Jason's voice was steady, filled with conviction. You've already made an impact, Emily. Your story is making people talk. It's making them think. That's how change starts. Emily nodded slowly, letting his words sink in. A spark of determination flickered in her eyes. I want to do more, she said quietly. I don't want to just be a victim. I want to make sure no one else has to go through what I did. Jason smiled. Then let's do it together. I've already made a statement online asking people to stand up against hate, but we can do more. We can make sure your voice is heard. Jason had already admired Emily's resilience, but now he was seeing a fighter. Despite everything she'd endured, she wasn't letting herself be defined by the attack. She was ready to turn her pain into something powerful. Before they could say more, a knock at the door interrupted their conversation. A police officer stepped inside, nodding politely before turning to Emily. "Miss Parker, I'm here to inform you that the man who attacked you has been arrested. We've reviewed the footage from the park, and there's more than enough evidence to press charges. He won't be hurting anyone else." Emily exhaled, a deep breath of relief finally escaping her chest. "Thank you." The officer continued, "We've also received word that the video has gained significant attention. There's a lot of public interest in your case, and we want to make sure you feel safe. If you need any protection or assistance, the department is here to help." Jason watched carefully, noting the irony of the situation, a police officer offering protection to a black woman after she'd already been attacked. A reminder of how often the system failed people like Emily, and how rare it was to see real justice being served. Jason's tone was polite, but firm. "We appreciate that. But what Emily really needs is to know this won't be swept under the rug. We need to make sure people like that biker face real consequences." The officer nodded. "I assure you, Mr. Statham, this case is being taken very seriously. The public outcry alone guarantees that." When the officer left, Jason turned back to Emily. "See? People are paying attention." Emily gave him a soft smile. "It's a start. But we've got a long way to go." Jason nodded. "We do. But we'll take it one step at a time. And we'll do it together." The story that shook the world. By the next morning, Emily's name was trending worldwide. News outlets ran headlines about the attack. Social media exploded with discussions. People from all walks of life shared their own experiences with racism, discrimination, and violence inspired by Emily's courage. But not everyone was celebrating. Somewhere in the shadows, the biker, Robert Hatcher, watched the news with a scowl. His arrest hadn't humbled him. It had only fueled his anger. And he wasn't alone. The battle against hate was far from over. But Jason and Emily? They were ready for whatever came next. The trial that the world watched. The courtroom was packed. People filled the seats, the air buzzing with murmurs as they waited for the trial to begin. The viral video had ignited a national firestorm, and the public was hungry for justice. Journalists scribbled notes. Cameras flashed outside the courthouse. Everyone wanted to know one thing. Would Robert Hatcher finally face the consequences of his actions? Emily sat at the front of the courtroom, her hands folded in her lap. She felt the weight of the moment pressing down on her, but she remained calm. Her expression steady. Jason sat beside her, offering silent support. Despite his celebrity status, he had never once made this about himself. He was here for her, to ensure that her voice was heard. The doors at the back of the courtroom swung open. All heads turned as Robert Hatcher was led inside, handcuffed, flanked by officers. His expression was defiant, cold, unrepentant. His gaze swept across the room until it landed on Emily. He sneered. But when his eyes shifted to Jason, for just a split second, his expression faltered. Jason met his stare head-on, unflinching. A silent challenge passed between them. The judge entered. Everyone stood. Then, the trial began. The evidence that couldn't be denied. The prosecution wasted no time. A large screen lit up, displaying the now infamous security footage from the park. The courtroom fell silent as the video played. They watched as Robert Hatcher approached Emily. They heard his hateful words, his disgusting insults. Then, they saw it. The moment he attacked her. Gasps rippled through the room as the violence unfolded on screen. Emily didn't look away. She refused to. She wouldn't be afraid. Not anymore. Jason, sitting beside her, felt a surge of pride at her strength. Then came the moment that changed everything. The video showed him stepping in, stopping the attack. And just like that, the courtroom fell into complete silence. It was a moment of clarity. A reminder that even in the face of hatred, one person's actions could change everything. Robert Hatcher had picked the wrong person to attack. Because this time, the world was watching, and justice was coming. In the courtroom, silence fell as Emily took the stand. Despite the weight of the moment, her voice remained steady as she recounted the attack, how she sought peace in the park, only to be targeted by hate. She spoke of fear, of pain, but also of the relief when Jason stepped in to stop it. When the defense tried to twist the truth, suggesting she had provoked the biker, Emily didn't waver. "He kicked me in the stomach." "How do you misinterpret that?" The courtroom murmured in agreement. With overwhelming evidence, the trial was swift. The prosecution's closing words resonated. This isn't just about one man's actions, it's about standing up to hate. The jury deliberated, and soon, the verdict came, guilty on all counts. As the judge handed down the sentence, the room erupted in applause. Justice had been served. Outside the courthouse, a crowd cheered for Emily. Reporters swarmed, but Jason stayed focused on her. She looked out at the sea of supporters and, for the first time in a long time, felt hope. But this was just the beginning. The viral video had sparked a movement. People weren't just talking, they were taking action. Inspired, Jason proposed an idea, a foundation to help victims of hate and violence. Emily didn't hesitate. "Let's do it." Days later, they stood before cameras once more, not as victim and rescuer, but as partners in change. "When I was attacked, I felt alone," Emily said. "But then, someone stood up for me. That changed everything. And now, we're here to make sure no one faces hate alone again." Applause filled the room. The foundation was born. The fight was far from over, but they were ready. As the sun set over the city, Emily turned to Jason. "Thank you." Jason smiled. "We're just getting started." What do you think about Jason's heroic act? Let me know in the comments. And remember, we all have the power to stand up against hate. Like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more stories that matter. Thanks for watching.